Number 16, Jonathan Allen says, greetings, Pastor Mike. How can we explain 2 Kings 2:23 and 24 in context? It involves Elisha and a group of young mockers who then get killed by 2 bears. This is like one of those atheist favorite verses. The ones online, the atheists online, who I've encountered. Christians have like your favorite Bible verse. You're like, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, right? There are, especially the more vocal anti-Christian atheists that are online, that have their favorite Bible verses too. They're just a different group of verses, and this is one of them. So, I went to First Kings, but it's 2 Kings, and this is about Elijah and the she-bear and go up bald man. Okay, I'm going to back up a little bit. No, I'm not. Here we are, verse 23. He went up from there to Bethel, and while he was going up on the way, some small boys came out of the city and jeered at him, saying, "Go up, you bald head, go up, you bald head." And he turned around, and when he saw them, he cursed them in the name of the Lord. And 2 she-bears came out of the woods and tore 42 of the boys. From there, he went on to Mount Carmel, and from there returned to Samaria. So here he goes up, Elisha goes up, and he's heading up there for, in the service of God, and he gets mocked by people from the local city. And okay, let's for a second just put on the shelf. I'll bring it off the shelf in a moment, but put on the shelf the age of these boys. Okay, how old are they? Let's put that on the shelf for a moment. But let's just talk about what happened. He is a prophet of God on a religious mission. When they say, "Go up, you bald head, go up, you bald head," they're mocking him with his baldness. Baldness being having a much greater insult nature in their ancient culture and in the Hebrew than what we're seeing in English here. So it's really significant. The "go up" part might be related. This is interesting. Might be related to spiritual claims about which locations in Israel were more spiritual than others. And I can't present you the research on this. There was a scholar, I think it was James Bejan, who wrote a paper on this. And you can look it up online, Bejon, Bejan, James Bejan. And he works for Tyndale. And he'd written a paper on this, about this "go up" phrase. And if I remember correctly, the bottom line was, the phrase "go up, you bald head," and forgive me if I'm wrong, James, it was like a year ago when I read your paper. But what it implied is the idea that they were making a spiritual claim that against Yahweh, against God, and because Elijah is the prophet of God, they're mocking him. So it's a spiritual claim about competing spiritual locations in Israel. And Jerusalem, you always go up to Jerusalem. Here it's about going up to some other location, and there was something about that was pretty interesting. But let's talk here then. Okay, so this was spiritual mockery and blasphemy in the land of Israel, who is covenanted with God. And the covenant is, you're my people, you will follow me, or there will be consequences, right? This is not the same as God's arrangement with everybody else in the world. It's with Israel in particular. So they're mocking the God who their fathers had covenanted with. They're ridiculing his prophet. This is not just, you called someone bald and you got mauled. It's not that. So how old are they? Here in the ESV, it says some small boys came out. Then later uses the same term to describe these in the Hebrew. I've looked into this before. So it uses the same term to describe them. And here they're called the boys. Let me show you a couple other translations just so you can see the internal discussion that translations are having about this issue. In the New King James, it says some youths came out from the city. All right. And then they're also called youths again. The NIV would put it as some boys came out. Now, we have to recognize that it's not cool to just say, "Oh, I'm just gonna say it's a translation issue," and then run the other way. But there are times where translation issues are very relevant and valid. Here is one of those times. This term for boys it pulls double duty, and we have some words like this in English, like kid. Sometimes kid is meant to refer to a young person, and other times it's referring to someone who's older but who's acting immature, and you want to be disrespectful to them, so you call them a kid. Okay, kid. You get that? Now, dictionary-wise, kid is going to refer to a young person, but also refers to other things. Now, in the book of Kings, the books of Kings, we have the same word used again of an adult male, and it's being used specifically to say that he's immature. I wonder if I could, I guess I won't dig up the passage, but it's when Solomon is being appointed as king, and he talks about it. And David, I think it's David talking about Solomon, how he's going to become king. And, and, I think it's David prayer and talking about Solomon where he says, and he uses the same exact Hebrew word to describe him, that he's like a little boy or a youth. But he was not a child at the time. He was not like a 6-year-old, right? Like he was an adult. But here, because of the weight of and this is the theme with Solomon becoming king, the weight of the kingdom upon his shoulders is so much. And he's aware, and he's like, God, give me wisdom. I don't have the wisdom. I'm just a little kid. I don't have the wisdom to guide and lead and decide things for your great people. And so that's the theme of Solomon being installed. And it's in the same author, 1st and 2nd Kings. It's in the same setting. Isn't that interesting? And Solomon comes in and he's called the same thing. I think there's good room for thinking here, and this is my opinion. And I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only one who thinks this. That these kids were young, probably. They may have been teenagers, but they weren't children. And if you start to realize how irrational this looks, imagine this. It's like a group of like 6-year-olds, 42 6-year-olds all running out of the town. Have you ever seen mobs of 6-year-olds? Like, no, they don't exist. They don't have 6-year-old mobs. What we do have is mobs of teenagers and young people full of, spit and vinegar, as it was, going around and echoing the very errors that are going on amongst their parents and in their culture as they mock the prophet of God. And so it's probably a young gang who's mocking, spiritually mocking, and they're being then mauled by these bears. That's how I understand the passage. At that point, I don't think there's anything to defend. I think a teenager can suffer for these kinds of egregious sins at the will of God. And I don't really have a problem with that. Some people do, but I think the problem is that they have a problem with that. Sorry guys. That's a different discussion.